So oligopoly is an abstract concept. It's a market in which is dominated a certain industry, which is dominated by just a small number of companies. So let's say 2 or 3 companies dominate a certain entire industry. That means a certain product that all these companies produce is produced 99% by just these 3 companies. That means they own the market. Basically, it's not just one company. There will be monopoly, but there's a few companies that share the market. And there's these 2 big attributes to it. The first one is high barriers to entry. It means it's very hard to enter this market. That's the reason why, in the first place, we have a small number of companies that compete in this market, and they might not even compete. Actually, we will go to that in a second. And then second, as I said, small amount of producers. You might have, I don't know, 2, 3, up to 5 maybe, and it's a small number of big firms that share the entire industry. That means all people buy from just these few companies. Okay. So next 2 things we will talk about is cartel and then government intervention to solve this. So the cartel is these companies, they have a downward sloping marginal revenue curve. That means change in price that they choose for their products will have effect on the quantity that they sell. So they have to maximize their profit, and very often it's similar with monopolies. They are willing to do a little higher cost and produce a little less, because when they produce a little less, you calculate from the graph, you would see that there's a high profit for them, even though they are producing a little less, because the price will go so much up. And they realize this, but there's more of these companies. So it's not like in monopoly when that company really has it decreases quantity with a rise in its own profit, but or let's say it systematically raises price with direct cost or with direct effect of that being that they actually rise their profit, so they can profitably rise their price. That's what monopolies do, but it's a company that decides on its own. But here we have oligopoly, and there's more than just one company. So it's this very similar case, but this dominance above that market, that industry, is shared among maybe 3 firms, 3 big companies. And so they cannot, or they have to all cooperate in order to be more efficient. And this is called a cartel. So what they very often choose to do is, because if one lowered price or rise, maybe, yeah, they cannot do the same like a monopoly. They have to act like a single company really to be the most efficient. So if one maybe lowered price to gain quantity, gain people, then the others would lose a lot of money, but the company itself will also lose possible money because it's lowering its price. So even if it's getting something from that, it's more profitable for all of them to rise price at once, because the people will be buying from these 3 anyway. So that's what I'm going to talk about now. It's cartel. So cartel, it's an organized or collusion, it can also be called. It's a cooperation between these few firms that own this industry. They dominate this industry. So there's these 3 firms, and so that they don't have different prices, so that they can act a little bit like they're one big connected group. They create this cartel, and they, in order to dominate the market completely and not have mutual losses. That means that maybe one firm kind of betrays the other 2, and it has for some time higher profits, but then those 2 firms adjust, and at the end the result is the firms will chase each other's prices to the same level, and they will all mostly lose from it. So for them it's much more economical to do this cartel, where what they do is they basically have this agreement that they will keep the prices high altogether. So all the companies of that oligopoly will sit together and negotiate in order to let's say set a certain higher price than the market price would naturally be, as is done with monopolies by a single firm. It doesn't have to negotiate this with any other firms, but here there's like 3 firms, so they sit together and they say, let's all together rise the price, so that none of us has the advantage. And then some of that firm can betray the others. That's called cheating the cartel, or maybe breaking the cartel. That means you really don't keep to the rules of the agreement. So there's this agreement, you will keep the price, but one company starts cheating. It means maybe lowers the price by a little bit, and all people jump to that company. So all of the 3 companies will, at the end of the day, by the game theory, will not have the possible profit they could have had if they stayed in the cartel. And of course, what the government does, it intervenes. There's many rules imposed in order to limit. In oligopoly in the first place, very often it's done by the fact that there's some state-owned companies maybe or something, and there's of course laws imposed to limit cartels. That means in order for cartels not to exist and not to cooperate this way to systematically raise prices for everybody, because these few companies would negotiate on that, there's laws prohibiting that. There's laws prohibiting cartels. So that's how this is avoided and how this is limited by the government. So this was oligopoly. It's a certain type of market. Of course, the 100% oligopoly rarely happens in the real world. This is an abstract idea, and if these points that I pointed out are 100% fulfilled, then it's an oligopoly. But in every real world market, you might say and point at it and say it's an oligopoly, but very often it will have signs of other market attributes as well.